This past week, I was reading one of the blogs that I follow, and I ran across a statement that just caught my attention. Not because of what it said, I've read and heard it before, but because of the context in which it was used. The author said that most every church believes that they are a welcoming church. But the truth is, what they really are is friendly to one another. What followed was nothing new either. But when coupled with this last statement and our gospel reading today, it made me begin to think. The author went on to say that in every community, even the church, what's really true is that the members don't always, or not always, friendly with one another. The reasons can be superficial. Well, they can go back generations, he says. Some may not even realize there's tension between them. But those who visit a community pick up on it rather quickly. How do they do so? Through our words and actions. Words and actions we say and do that we may not even realize we are doing. As a seminary intern, serving in a church in Huntsville, Alabama, I was asked to develop and lead a multi-generational class. An inquirer's class, if you will, the same one I offer every Epiphany here. It was a friendly group with great conversation. Then one Sunday, after class, a lady came up to me and said, "I have a question for you." And I'm ready with my old priestly thing. I wasn't a priest yet, but I was ready like that. "Yes, what can I do for you?" She goes, "Why is it every time I ask a question, you look at your watch?" I was flabbergasted. And the only answer I could offer was an apology. I never realized I was doing this. So I went up and I asked one of the members of the group there, and I said, "Do I really look at my watch every time she asks me a question?" And he said, "Yeah, you do."
No.
But to be honest, he goes on, every time she asks a question, I look at my watch too. That made me think, was it her personality, or was it my unconscious act that was prompting others to do the same? The typical human response is, of course, well, it's the other person's fault. I can't be the one at fault. But as I reflected on this a little bit more, I began to question, what kind of signal was I sending about this woman's worth to our group? While wondering at the same time if I had simply begun doing so because I saw other people doing it. Either way, I knew something wasn't right. Something had to change if we were going to continue journeying together as we studied how to live more faithfully into our baptismal promises. So, for the remainder of those classes, I took off my watch and stuffed it in my pocket. Now that seems like a silly thing to be worried about, doesn't it? But what if a guest, or say somebody new to our parish, were to come up and ask us a question, maybe about what we do or what we believe or something about the community. And while they're talking to us, we're standing there and we're looking over here and we're looking over there, over there. They're going to catch on really quickly that we're not really paying attention to them. And they likely see our faces light up when we see someone who's a friend. And maybe we might even scowl just a little bit if we see someone outside our personal circles. See, our faces, like our bodies, are an open book, telling people how we relate to one another. Something else that tells people how well we get along is how well we work and play together. Now, some of you will remember that line item on your report card, don't you? Works well and plays well with others. Check. But how can someone see this on a typical Sunday here, or any at church? Well, if we have a flare-up like we heard in the gospel today, it's rather easy, isn't it? But there are more subtle ways that speak just as loudly as a voice raised in anger. In a tradition like ours, known for the beauty of its liturgy, watching an altar team, or the congregation for that matter, simply go through the motions, or ushers that can't seem to raise a smile when they're taking up the collection, or people spread out to maximize their personal space, or joyous hymns that really fall flat because the energy they're supposed to provoke doesn't come forth by those singing, are all ways that I have read about that signal the harmony people are looking for may not really be here. Now, can we all have a bad day? You bet. That's no problem. But when the whole of what we do sends such a tone to the outsider, it's like a big red flag blowing in the wind. And should a guest somehow get past all this, another area they say churches highlight the depth of their community, or not, is during coffee hour. Beyond just the groupings that gather that don't leave room for people to join in, or conversations our guest might overhear that might be a little problematic, it is the number of people who stay after service that is telling. When a majority of the people exit as soon as they can after the service is done, it highlights the fact that people on that group don't feel that they are part of that group. They don't feel they belong. They're outsiders in their own community. Now, I'm not saying this is us. These are things that I've been reading over the last 6 months or so in the blogs. But I bet if we looked at ourselves critically, we'd see that sometimes we kind of fit into this norm. We have our good days and our not so good ones, too. The question is, are we good more than not? Personally, I know I can do a lot better. I may not wear a watch any longer, but I can bet each and every one of you can name at least one time in the last 10 years when you did not have my full attention. Or when I seemed distant at a time we are celebrating. I wish this wasn't true, but to say otherwise, I'd only be fooling myself. And I appreciate some of the excuses you have all given me when I'm like this. He hasn't had his morning coffee. It's been a long week. He's really tired. He just needs some rest. The truth is, all of these are great excuses and valid to a point. But what really distracts me is when something happens that reminds me that we, and I'm including myself in this, are more like James, John, and the disciples than we are Jesus. Those times when we either say or do something or don't, that is all about us and what we want for ourselves, forgetting, as we hear in the gospel today, that we are part of a community. In those times, I have found myself humbled, as I'm sure the disciples were, by Jesus' response. That he, and that means us as disciples of his, came not to be served, but to serve. It's not just a church thing, folks. It's a worldly thing, too. When we seek privilege, the place of honor, or anything that raises us above another, or leaves others the burden of our responsibilities, we fall short of the commandment that Jesus gives, that we love one another as he loved us. Love that enabled him to place our needs before his own. Love so deep that he gave his life as a ransom so that we might enjoy and know the grace and love of God instead of the suffering we deserve that results from a lack of love shown to others. Now, I'm not suggesting that anyone here go out and sacrifice himself on behalf of this church just to show how deep their love for God is. But there are things that I believe we can do that show those present and those who walk into our midst that our love is real. To begin with, we can strive to have even more good days than we do not. Trying our best to be less like those communities I read about in the blogs and more like the one Jesus wishes us to be. A community in which we are not looking out for ourselves, but for the brothers and sisters we gather with to worship and be in fellowship with. And by remembering, we gather together not to be served, but to serve. So let's seek to serve one another, be it in the pledges we offer, the ministries we serve in or support, or our willingness to invite someone else to come and know the grace of God in our midst. In our efforts to serve one another, trusting in God to be serving alongside us, then we really can do more than we think is possible. And we can give more of ourselves than we think we have to give. Not only will this make us a more welcoming community, but in doing so, we live more faithfully into our baptismal promises, especially the one to seek and serve Christ in all persons.